Hi guys, so today I want to talk about my favorite thing in all the world, which is Disney. About a month and a half ago, I got back from my third solo trip to Disney World, and I feel like I have enough information to give a pretty good pros and cons list of going to Disney alone. My first trip to Disney was just supposed to be a one and done trip, and I would just take it off my bucket list and never go back. But it has become an obsession. And I've gone back 2 times since my first trip in the past year and a half. To say that I was scared to go to Disney by myself is an understatement. I was petrified. I booked my first trip about a month out, and a week before I had a full-blown panic attack and I just wanted to cancel the trip entirely. And I had even traveled to New York by myself and I had no issues, but for some reason Florida just seemed so much scarier. But I'm so glad that I found the courage to take the trip because it was the best trip of my life. Right off the bat, if you are planning on taking a solo trip to Disney World, definitely do it. There are way more pros than cons of going alone. I was actually looking at another trip this morning, but I still haven't paid off my last trip, so it'll be a while before I book another one. I don't have a fear of flying, but I definitely have travel anxiety. I worry about the layovers, if my debit card's going to work, if my phone's gonna work, or if I lose my phone, what if I end up in the hospital, that type of anxiety. I have talked about my solo trips in a few other videos, just briefly. I have my first trip, I showed what I was packing and bringing with me, and I did a cost breakdown, so you can go back and look at that. And then on my last trip, I also did a little pack with me video. For my first trip to Disney World, I definitely wanted to stay on site. I just thought that it would make me feel safer, which it definitely did. I love being in the Disney bubble. So far, I've stayed at 3 of the value resorts, and I love the value resorts. They're super kitschy, they're the most inexpensive. You get early access to the park, you get all the bus transportation. If you want to spend a little bit more money and stay at Art of Animation or the Pop Century, you can get on the Skyliner, which is super fun, unless you're really scared of heights. So I always just take the Mirror shuttle from the airport. You can also take an Uber, but it costs a little bit more. And it'll drop you off at your resort, and it may make a few stops along the way, depending on what resort you're staying at. And the free Disney transportation at Disney World is amazing. I think the buses run like every 5-7 minutes. So even if you miss one, there's another one on the way. I don't make any special requests for my resort room, but I have heard of other women that will request to not be on the first floor, not have a room that's facing a parking lot. I had a room facing the back parking lot during my last day, and I didn't feel unsafe. I never feel unsafe when I'm at Disney World, but you may feel like you want to take those extra precautions. I think one of the pros or cons, depending on how you look at it, of going solo to Disney World is the cost. In comparison to a family of 4, it's definitely going to be much cheaper to travel alone. But if you were going with a friend or a group of friends and you were splitting the hotel cost, then that would obviously be a lot cheaper than traveling by yourself. I personally pay about $3,000 to $4,000 for my trips, and that's in Canadian, but I have to add about 25% onto my trips for my conversions. I was a little bit worried the first time that I went to Disney World that I would feel kind of lonely, but I think that vlogging really helped because it made me feel like I was talking to someone. That might be something you want to consider if you go by yourself, is to just have a camera and just take some videos. Depending on whether or not you feel comfortable with that, I find that vlogging, especially in public, helps me to overcome my social anxiety, but it was very, very hard to do that in the beginning. There have been days though where I didn't vlog in a park and I didn't notice a difference. I love taking the videos too because when I get back from my trips, it's usually such a whirlwind of doing things and seeing things that it's really nice to have that footage to look at. If I'm having a day where I kind of feel down and I need cheered up, I'll actually go back and watch my Disney vlogs because it kind of gives me that feeling of being in the park again. So even if you don't vlog and share it with anybody, I think they're just nice to have. It's like taking a picture, but 10 times better. On my first trip though, I was a little concerned about asking people to take photos of me, so I ended up purchasing the PhotoPass Memory Maker package. But I also had a little tripod with me to take just some videos. You can't bring a selfie stick in, I don't believe, but you can bring a little tripod for your phone. There's really only 2 reasons why I might feel alone in a Disney park. And the first one is if I don't get a lightning lane and I don't purchase Genie Plus for the day and I end up in a really long line. You'll just look around and notice that everyone's talking to each other and their families and friends. And those are the moments where I'm like, okay, I am very alone right now. But it's not like a sad, depressing lonely. It's more like, oh my gosh, this line is so long and I'm so bored. So if you can afford to do Genie Plus and the lightning lanes, I think that that's a good idea. I know that they keep getting more and more expensive, but if you're just going by yourself and you don't have to pay for anybody else, then I think it's kind of worth it. But there are also single rider lines at Disney World, which are so awesome. You get to skip the entire line. You do have to pair up usually with another person or a family, but the rides are only like 5 or 6 minutes anyways, so it's no big deal. Probably the biggest pro of going solo to Disney World is getting to do whatever you want, whenever you want. I'm an early bird, and even just on a regular weekend day at home, I'm up at like 5 or 6 in the morning. So I think that if I had traveled with somebody else the first few times that I went to Disney World and they wanted to just sleep in, it would have drove me insane. I definitely would have had to be with someone that was like, all right, 7 o'clock in the morning, let's go. But if you're a person that likes to sleep in and take your time getting ready in the morning, you also don't have to worry about someone rushing you. I do like to grab a quick breakfast in the morning when I'm there at my resort and then hop on a bus. The cafeteria area is usually open by 6 in the morning and I'm usually on a bus by 7. And if you're staying on site, you can get into the park around like 8:30 for early access. That way I can get on all the big rides right away before the lines get really busy, and then I don't have to buy Genie Plus for the day. And if I want to go back to my resort in the afternoon, I don't have to worry about what the other person wants to do. A lot of times it just hits me randomly when I decide that I'm tired and I want to go back to the resort. So even if I plan to only go back at 3 and I get tired at noon, I don't have to discuss it with anyone and I can just hop out of the park and come back later. Same thing with restaurants and food. You don't have to worry about what does the other person want to do. Do they want to do sit-down restaurants throughout the day, make reservations, or do you just want to grab food along the way? The only other time that I feel alone in Disney World is when I sit down to eat somewhere, and I think that's more because of how our society looks at people that eat alone. You'll see like those videos on social media sometimes where somebody is filming somebody eating alone and it's supposed to be like this really sad situation, and then they'll post it on social media, which don't do that. Let's not do that. It's interesting to me that you can be alone in a lot of different situations, whether it's going to the gym or going to the library, going for a walk, going to a cafe. But the second you sit down and start eating, it is so sad. I actually prefer sometimes to eat alone because then I can really concentrate on my meal and really enjoy it, and I don't have to worry about the conversation and what I'm gonna say next. But the only time that I ever felt like really self-conscious sitting down to eat was on my last trip at Sleepy Hollow. I grabbed like a corn dog meal and I sat down next to this table of teenagers. Is there anything more intimidating as an adult than being near teenagers? They can be super nice. I just feel like I'm being judged by them very harshly. And I did catch them looking at me a few times and then talking, which made it 1,000 times worse. But eventually one of them ended up just wishing me happy birthday because I had this birthday Disney pin on me. And they were super sweet. So I was just assuming that they were judging me, and they weren't at all. When I started to feel a little bit kind of self-conscious in public for being alone, I always like to just stop and take a look around to see who else is there alone. And at Disney World, there are tons of people there by themselves. My first sit-down experience was at the Beast Castle in Magic Kingdom, and they sat me along this wall that just had tables with 2 seats, and the room was filled with families eating, but I looked over and noticed another girl that was sitting by herself eating alone, and I immediately felt better about myself. Leading up to my trips though, I was watching a lot of Disney vloggers, and I think it helped to ease me into going to Disney World alone, because a lot of these vloggers are in there every single day, going on rides by themselves, eating by themselves, reviewing the food. If you struggle with social anxiety, I totally understand the temptation with a solo trip to just not go, but it is so worth it. Definitely do it. I want to see all of the Disneylands. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them. I want to go on the cruises, and I want to do all the kind of extra add-ons at Disney World. It is literally a world. There is so much to do. I have been there 3 times now, and I still haven't gone on every ride, haven't seen all the shows. There are so many restaurants and so much food. It's impossible. It's impossible to do and see it all in even 3 trips. The second time that I went to Disney World, I actually went to Universal first, and they kind of have their own little bubble as well. So I stayed at the Dockside Inn, took the free bus transportation, and then after my 2 days in the parks, I transferred to a Disney resort and just took an Uber. I may talk about this at some point in another video on just the mental health benefits of going to Disney World. As some of you already know, I am getting EMDR treatment, and that is for complex PTSD, and I also have an anxiety disorder, and Disney has been so healing for me. It gives me something so exciting to look forward to. And Disney World is so imaginative and immersive. I think that it just satisfies that part of us that needs or craves fantasy and escape. And I honestly just feel like a big kid when I get in there. And the best part is that there's all different ages. We're all allowed to just be big kids. My first trip was the best I ever felt in my entire life, and also the worst I had ever felt in my entire life. I spent a lot of time when I wasn't in the park crying in my hotel room, and I felt a lot of guilt and shame for being depressed in the happiest place on earth. And there were days that I had to force myself to get up and go into the parks. And I'm so glad that I did, because I always felt this really heavy cloud that would lift off of me as soon as I walked into the park. Disney is definitely its own form of therapy. If there's any questions that you have, let me know below. I think I covered all of the pros and cons that I can think of. And if you're thinking of going, do it. Book the trip. You won't regret it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a colorful day.